Quentin Blackburn slammed his laptop shut, his jaw clenched so tightly that his executive assistant visibly flinched. The quarterly report showed numbers that exceeded every projection, yet the board's email had been clear. Take a vacation, Quentin, effective immediately. 4 weeks minimum. It wasn't a suggestion. After 7 years of building black tech enterprises into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, apparently his increasingly erratic behavior and concerning work patterns had become a liability. "They can't do this to me," Quentin muttered, running his hand through his dark hair, now peppered with gray at 35. "The Singapore merger is in 3 weeks. With all due respect, sir," his assistant Julian said carefully, "you haven't taken a day off in 4 years. The board has concerns about what? My dedication, the fact that I've tripled our market value, about your health," Julian finished quietly. "Dr. Patterson called them after your physical." Quentin felt a flush of betrayal. His doctor had gone behind his back. Though the chest pains last month had been concerning, he'd written them off as indigestion. The panic attacks in the elevator he'd blamed on poor ventilation. "Fine," Quentin snapped, standing abruptly. "Book me somewhere with good Wi-Fi, somewhere I can work without interruption." Julian shook his head. "The board's terms were specific. Your access to company servers will be restricted. They've already briefed Mr. Calloway to handle operations." He placed a glossy brochure on the desk. They suggested Hawaii, specifically a place called Hanalei Bay on Kauai. "It's remote, peaceful, and as far away from headquarters as possible while still being in the country," Quentin finished bitterly. 2 days later, Quentin found himself on a private jet heading west over the Pacific. He'd fought, argued, and finally threatened, but the board had stood firm. His executive powers were temporarily suspended, his email access limited to personal accounts, and his phone now contained not a single work app. The resort was admittedly beautiful, a collection of luxury bungalows nestled between lush mountains and turquoise waters. His private villa overlooked the bay, with a sprawling deck and infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. Under different circumstances, he might have appreciated it. "Mr. Blackburn, welcome to Hanalei Bay," the concierge said, leading him through the open-concept living space. "We've arranged everything according to your assistant's instructions. Your refrigerator is fully stocked. Housekeeping is scheduled for mornings only, and there will be no disturbances unless requested." "Perfect," Quentin said flatly, already eyeing the desk where he could set up his laptop. "And as requested, we've scheduled your first surfing lesson for tomorrow morning." Quentin stopped. "My what?" the concierge smiled. "Your surfing lessons." Mr. Julian was quite specific about it, 3 times weekly for the duration of your stay. "Your instructor will meet you on the beach at 8 a.m. "Cancel it," Quentin said immediately. "I don't surf." "I'm afraid the scheduling is confirmed, sir. Talia is our most requested instructor. There's a 3-month waiting list." Mr. Julian was quite insistent. Quentin made a mental note to fire Julian upon his return. "Fine. Whatever." After the concierge left, Quentin paced the villa like a caged animal. He tried watching the sunset, tried reading the financial magazines Julian had packed, even attempted meditating as his doctor had suggested. By 9 p.m., he'd reorganized his email folders, drafted business plans for 2 new ventures, and texted Julian 17 times demanding information about ongoing projects. Julian's only response had been a sunset emoji and "Enjoy paradise, boss." Morning came with birdsong and golden light filtering through the plantation shutters. Quentin had slept poorly, his body still on New York time. He made espresso with the fancy machine in his kitchen, downed it black, and reluctantly changed into the board shorts Julian had packed. The beach was already active with early morning swimmers and a few dedicated surfers carving through distant waves. Quentin stood awkwardly in the sand, feeling out of place in his designer sunglasses and brand new flip-flops. "You must be Quentin." He turned to find a woman approaching with 2 surfboards tucked under her arm as if they weighed nothing. She was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and wild honey-blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore a simple rash guard over board shorts, no makeup, and a smile that seemed genuine rather than the practiced customer service variety. "Talia Zane," she said, extending her free hand. "Your surfing guru for the foreseeable future." Her handshake was firm, her palm calloused. "I should warn you that this wasn't my idea," Quentin said. "I'm not exactly the surfing type." Talia looked him over appraisingly. "Let me guess. You're more the check email while on a treadmill type." Despite himself, Quentin felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Something like that." "Well, you're in luck. The ocean doesn't care what type you are. It'll toss you around regardless of your net worth or job title." She thrust one of the boards toward him. "This is a beginner longboard, practically impossible to drown with this thing." "That's reassuring," Quentin said dryly. "First lesson in surfing, leave your ego on the beach," Talia said, heading toward the water. "Nobody looks cool their first time, not even CEOs." Quentin stiffened. "How did you? Your assistant was thorough in his briefing," she said over her shoulder. "Also, you're still wearing your watch." "That's about a $20,000 mistake if we get past the whitewater." Quentin glanced down at his wrist where his limited edition diving watch gleamed in the morning sun. He hesitated, then unclasped it and tucked it into his shoe. The next hour was humbling. Despite his regular workouts at his penthouse gym, Quentin discovered that paddling a surfboard through breaking waves required an entirely different kind of strength. His arms burned, salt water stung his eyes, and his pristine board shorts chafed in places he'd rather not think about. Talia, meanwhile, moved through the water like she'd been born in it. She was patient but not coddling, correcting his form with direct instructions and occasional demonstrations that made the whole process look ridiculously easy. "You're thinking too much," she told him after his third failed attempt to stand on the board. "Your body needs to react, not your brain. CEOs are the worst for this, always analyzing instead of feeling." "Maybe I'm just not cut out for surfing," Quentin said, spitting out seawater. "Maybe," Talia agreed easily. "Or maybe you just need to stop approaching it like a business problem. Not everything in life has a strategic solution, Quentin." By the end of the lesson, he'd managed to stand briefly on the board before unceremoniously crashing into the water. His muscles ached, his sinuses burned from salt water, and his expensive haircut was ruined. Yet somehow he felt a flicker of accomplishment that was different from closing a deal or seeing a stock price rise. "Same time, day after tomorrow," Talia said as they trudged back onto the beach. "And don't even think about canceling. Your assistant prepaid and I have a strict no-refund policy." "Wouldn't dream of it," Quentin said, surprised to find he actually meant it. Back at his villa, Quentin showered away the salt and sand, then collapsed onto the massive bed. He'd planned to work on his laptop, maybe make some calls to check on things back home. Instead, he slept for 3 solid hours, the deepest sleep he'd had in months. Over the next week, a routine emerged. Mornings with Talia 3 times weekly, learning to navigate the gentle swells of the bay. Afternoons working on his laptop, though he found himself increasingly distracted by the view outside his windows. Evenings walking the beach or sitting on his deck, actually noticing the spectacular sunsets. By his third lesson, Quentin had progressed to catching small waves on his own. The first time he rode one all the way to shore, standing the entire time, he felt a surge of joy so pure and unexpected that he laughed out loud. "There it is," Talia said, paddling up beside him. "That's why people surf, that feeling right there. It's," Quentin searched for words, "addictive." "More than making money," she teased. "Different," he admitted. "Making money feels good, but it's a complicated good. This is." He gestured vaguely at the ocean. "Simple." Talia studied him, her expression softening slightly. "You're getting it faster than I expected. I'm a quick learner." "No, not the surfing," she said. "The other part, the reason you're here." Quentin felt a flash of irritation. "Did my assistant tell you to psychoanalyze me too? No need. I've taught enough burned-out executives to recognize the pattern." She paddled ahead of him. "Race you to that boy." Loser buys breakfast. Before he could protest, she was gliding through the water with powerful strokes. Quentin hesitated only briefly before chasing after her, knowing he'd lose but somehow not minding. Breakfast became a post-lesson tradition. They'd find a spot at one of the small local cafes, still damp from the ocean, Talia's hair drying in wild, salt-stiffened waves, Quentin's designer swim shorts looking increasingly weathered. She told him about growing up on Kauai, about leaving for college in California only to return when she realized mainland life wasn't for her. "My parents thought I was crazy," she said over coffee and tropical fruit. "Dad's a software engineer who works remotely now, Mom's a retired professor." They had all these expectations for their only child. "And instead you became a surf instructor," Quentin said, "among other things. I also have a marine biology degree gathering dust, and I manage the local conservation project for monk seals. The surf instruction pays the bills and keeps me in the water." Quentin found himself increasingly fascinated by her. Talia approached life with a directness and authenticity that was foreign to his world of corporate politics and strategic relationships. When she spoke about the ocean or the island's ecology, her passion was palpable. There was no calculation in her enthusiasm, no angle she was working. "What?" she asked, catching him staring during their fourth breakfast together. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just trying to figure you out." Talia laughed. "I'm not a business problem either, Quentin. I'm beginning to see that." As his second week on the island progressed, Quentin found himself checking his phone less frequently. The sunburn across his shoulders faded to a tan. His normally precise haircut grew shaggy from salt and sun. When Julian texted to check in, Quentin surprised himself by responding with a photo of the sunset rather than demands for company updates. "You're different in the water," Talia observed during their fifth lesson as they sat on their boards waiting for the next set of waves. "Less rigid." "Is that a compliment or criticism?" Quentin asked. "Just an observation. The ocean has that effect on people. It's bigger than we are, more powerful than any human system. Puts things in perspective." Quentin watched the horizon, the endless blue meeting the sky. "I built my company from nothing," he said suddenly. "Started coding in my college dorm room, launched with 3 employees in a basement office. Now we employ over 2,000 people. That's impressive," Talia said, and he could tell she meant it. "It's all I've thought about for years. Every decision, every relationship, everything filtered through what was best for black tech." "And now," Quentin surprised himself with his answer. "Now I'm wondering if there's more." After their lesson that day, Talia suggested a hike rather than their usual breakfast. "There's a waterfall not far from here. Tourist brochures don't mention it." The trail was muddy and steep in places, winding through dense tropical vegetation. Quentin, still in his board shorts and a t-shirt, found himself sweating profusely within minutes. Talia moved ahead easily, occasionally pointing out native plants or birds. "You're doing this on purpose," Quentin accused as he scrambled over a fallen tree. "Showing the soft city CEO how out of his element he is." "Maybe," Talia admitted with a grin. "Or maybe I'm just seeing if you're willing to experience something without researching it to death first." The waterfall, when they reached it, was worth every muddy step. It cascaded from a cliff above into a clear pool surrounded by ferns and flowering plants. Without hesitation, Talia pulled off her rash guard, revealing a simple bikini top, and dove into the pool. Quentin stood at the edge, momentarily transfixed by both the scenery and the woman emerging from the water, pushing her hair back from her face. "Are you coming in, or are you going to overthink this too?" she called. He pulled off his shirt and jumped, the cool freshwater a shock after the warmth of the ocean. They swam and talked, their voices echoing slightly against the rock walls. For the first time in years, Quentin felt fully present in a moment, not mentally cataloging tasks or planning his next move. "Why do you do it?" Talia asked as they sat on sun-warmed rocks afterward. The whole never-stop-working thing, Quentin considered deflecting, then decided against it. It started as necessity. Early startups demand everything, then it became habit, and then he paused. Then it became a shield, I guess. Against what? Failure, irrelevance, he smiled wryly. The terrifying void of unstructured time. Talia didn't laugh at his attempt at humor. And relationships, where do those fit in? They don't, usually. My last serious girlfriend left 2 years ago. Said being with me was like dating a smartphone with occasional human tendencies. Ouch, she wasn't wrong. Quentin looked at Talia, really looked at her, the freckles across her nose, the tiny scar above her eyebrow, the directness of her gaze. What about you? No significant other monopolizing your waterfall privileges. Something flickered across her face. Not currently. Island dating has its challenges. Limited pool, everyone knows everyone's business. And yet you stay. This is home, she said simply. The ocean, the mountains. I tried leaving once. Lasted 6 months in San Francisco before I realized I was miserable. Some people are meant for certain places. And certain people aren't meant for relationships, Quentin added, more to himself than to her. Talia studied him. Maybe. Or maybe they just haven't found something worth rearranging their life for. As they hiked back, Quentin found himself acutely aware of Talia in a way that went beyond their instructor-client relationship. The way she moved, confident and graceful. The way she listened when he spoke, fully engaged rather than waiting for her turn. The way she challenged him without making him feel defensive. That evening, instead of working on his laptop, Quentin sat on his deck watching the stars emerge. His phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Board meeting update. They're pleased with reports of your decompression. Callaway handling the Singapore deal well. Thought you'd want to know. Surprisingly, Quentin found he didn't care as much as he expected to. His mind kept drifting back to Talia, to the waterfall, to her question about what was worth rearranging a life for. Their next surfing lesson fell on a day with larger swells. Talia suggested they stick to the smaller waves near shore, but Quentin, feeling increasingly confident, insisted on paddling out further. Your funeral, Talia said with a shrug. Just remember, the ocean doesn't care about your ego. The wave that caught him was larger than anything he'd attempted before. For a few glorious seconds, he was up, riding the face of it, feeling the rush of speed and the power beneath his board. Then the wave pitched, curling over itself faster than he could react. The wipeout was spectacular, his board flying one way, his body tumbling through the churning water. For a disorienting moment, Quentin didn't know which way was up. His lungs burned, his limbs flailed uselessly. Then strong hands gripped his arm, pulling him to the surface. Breathe, Talia commanded as his head cleared the water. She had one arm around him, the other holding her board. You're okay. They made it to shore where Quentin collapsed onto the sand, coughing up seawater. That was stupid, Talia said, but her voice was gentle. You weren't ready for that size, clearly, Quentin managed between coughs. Although, she added, sitting beside him, your takeoff wasn't bad. Another few lessons and you might actually handle a wave that size. Is that your professional assessment? It is. She brushed wet hair from his face, her fingers lingering slightly. You're a fast learner, Quentin Blackburn, when you stop overthinking. Something in her touch, or maybe in the adrenaline still coursing through his system, made Quentin bold. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. Not as my instructor, as whatever this is becoming. Talia's expression was unreadable for a moment, then she smiled, slow and genuine. Pick me up at 7, I'll text you the address. Quentin spent more time getting ready that evening than he had for his last board presentation. He selected the least formal of the outfits. He'd packed dark jeans and a light linen shirt, and for the first time in weeks, he put on his watch. Talia's home was a small but charming bungalow set back from the road, surrounded by flowering plants and fruit trees. When she opened the door, Quentin momentarily forgot what he'd planned to say. She wore a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, a single plumeria blossom tucked behind her ear. You clean up nicely, CEO, she said, her eyes taking in his appearance. I was half expecting you to show up in board shorts. I considered it, he admitted, but I wanted to make a good impression. They drove to a restaurant on the North Shore, a place Talia recommended with tables set directly on the sand. Under string lights and stars, with the sound of waves as background music, they talked for hours. Quentin found himself sharing stories he rarely told about the early struggles of his company, about his parents' skepticism when he dropped out of his MBA program to pursue his startup, about the loneliness that sometimes hit him despite being surrounded by employees and associates. Talia listened, asked questions that made him think, and shared her own stories about growing up exploring the island's hidden corners, about her brief stint in marine research before returning home, about her father's disappointment when she chose what he called a vacation lifestyle over a traditional career. He doesn't get that I'm happier this way, she said. That for me, success isn't measured in promotions or portfolio growth. How do you measure it then? Quentin asked. Talia considered this. In moments, I guess, days when the surf is perfect, helping a seal pup return to the wild. Teaching someone to see the ocean the way I do, she smiled at him. Connections that matter. After dinner, they walked along the moonlit beach. The night air was warm, fragrant with plumeria and salt. Without conscious thought, Quentin reached for her hand. Talia's fingers interlaced with his, warm and certain. I'm leaving in a little over a week, he said, the reality of it suddenly sharp. I know. This wasn't part of the plan. You weren't part of the plan. Talia turned to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. I never am for men like you. I'm the vacation experience, the island fling, I get it. No, Quentin said firmly. That's not what I meant. I don't know how to fit this whatever is happening between us into my life, but I want to try. Talia studied him, seeming to search for something in his face. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she stepped closer. Then try, she whispered and kissed him. The remaining days of Quentin's vacation took on a dreamlike quality. Mornings with Talia on the waves, where he progressed to riding more challenging swells. Afternoons exploring the island, hiking to remote beaches, snorkeling in protected coves, visiting the botanical gardens where Talia knew the staff by name. Evenings spent on his villa's deck or at her small home, talking until stars faded or falling asleep entangled in each other. You've changed, she told him one night as they lay on a blanket on his deck, the sound of waves drifting up from below. Since you arrived. How so? Quentin asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. You listen differently, watch things differently, like you're actually here, not just physically present while your mind is somewhere else. Quentin knew she was right. Something had shifted in him beyond just falling for Talia. The constant urgency that had driven him for years had receded. He still checked in with Julian occasionally, still had ideas for the company, but the compulsive need to control every aspect had diminished. It's this place, he said, and you. 3 days before his scheduled departure, Quentin received an email from the board. They were pleased with reports of his renewed energy and improved perspective. He suspected Julian had been giving them updates. They expected him back refreshed and ready to lead the company forward. Quentin stared at his laptop screen, a strange reluctance washing over him. The thought of returning to 14-hour days, to meetings stacked back to back, to sleeping with his phone beside his pillow, it no longer held the appeal it once had. That evening, he told Talia about the email as they prepared dinner in her small kitchen. So you'll go back to being CEO Quentin, conquering the tech world, she said, her tone light though he detected something beneath it. That's the expectation. And what do you want? She turned from chopping vegetables to look at him. Quentin hesitated. I want balance. I want to run my company without letting it run me, and I want. What? You, he said simply. I want to see where this goes. I'm not ready for it to end when my plane takes off. Talia's expression was guarded. I've done long distance before. It doesn't work, Quentin, especially not with someone whose default setting is work first, everything else second. Then I'll change the settings. He moved closer, taking her hands. I can work remotely part of the time. Open a satellite office here. Find solutions. You make it sound so simple. It's not, but some things are worth rearranging your life for. The morning of his departure, they sat on the beach watching the sunrise. Quentin had barely slept, his mind cycling through possibilities and plans. I have something to show you, he said, pulling out his phone. He opened his calendar app and showed her the recurring blocks scheduled for the next 3 months. Kauai appeared every third week. You're coming back? Talia asked, surprise evident in her voice. For now. I've talked to the board about a new working arrangement. I'll be in New York for critical operations, but I'll work remotely 1 week per month. Eventually, I want to split my time more evenly. And they agreed to this. They did. Apparently, having a CEO who doesn't trigger medical concerns is worth some flexibility. He put his phone away. It's not perfect. There will be times when business keeps me in New York longer, but it's a start. Talia was quiet for a moment, watching the waves. I can't leave here, Quentin. Not permanently. I've tried living elsewhere. This island is part of me. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm asking for a chance to find a middle ground, to see if what we've found here can grow into something real. And if it doesn't work, then we'll know we tried. He took her hand. I've spent years calculating risks, Talia. This is the first time I've found something where the potential reward makes any risk worthwhile. 6 months later, Quentin stood on the deck of his newly purchased home overlooking Hanalei Bay. It wasn't as large as his New York penthouse, but with its open floor plan and panoramic views, it felt more like home than any place he'd ever owned. Inside, Talia was unpacking the last of the kitchen supplies they'd bought in town. They'd established a rhythm over the past months, 2 weeks in New York, where Talia had discovered a surprising enjoyment of the city's energy and diversity, followed by 2 weeks on Kauai, where Quentin continued to improve his surfing and had even begun assisting with Talia's conservation work. Black Tech was thriving under the new arrangement. Quentin had delegated more responsibility to his executive team, focused on strategic direction rather than daily operations, and found that the company actually benefited from his more balanced approach. His creativity had surged, resulting in 2 promising new initiatives that wouldn't have emerged in his previous work-consumed state. What are you thinking about? Talia asked, joining him on the deck. She slipped an arm around his waist, leaning into him. How drastically my life has changed in half a year, he said. How being forced to take a vacation turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. The vacation or the surf instructor, she teased. Quentin turned to face her, taking in the woman who had appended every assumption he'd held about what success and happiness looked like. Definitely the surf instructor, he said, pulling her closer. Although I should probably send the board a thank you gift for their intervention. I think you already did, Talia reminded him. The stock price had reached record highs last quarter, vindicating his new approach to leadership. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, Quentin reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From reluctant vacationer to a man building a life split between 2 worlds, finding balance he'd never thought possible, and discovering that the most valuable acquisition of his career had nothing to do with business at all. I love you, he said, words that had once been foreign to his vocabulary now coming easily. I love you too, Talia replied, her smile as bright and genuine as the day they'd met. Even if you still overthink everything. Not everything, Quentin said, kissing her as the waves crashed below. Some things I just feel,